Okay, everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started now. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Len Thompson. I'm the Workload Automation Community Manager here at CA Technologies. And welcome to Unwrap Your Applications, our latest Workload Automation webcast. Joining us today is John Rooney, who, as you can see from this PowerPoint slide, is the Director of Pre-Sales here at CA Technologies. Before we get started, just a little bit of housekeeping. I know that most of you are listening to this session via the audio broadcast right within WebEx, so you can't actually talk to us. But if you do have questions along the way, please use the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. If you don't see that right now, just click on the question mark icon in the upper right, and it will open up for you. That's actually a really good way for us to go through the questions anyway to make sure we get everyone's questions answered that we can. With that, I'm going to hand you off to Jean Rissmiller before John gets started. So go ahead, Jean.
I'm Jean Rissmiller, Product Marketing for our CA Automation Business Unit here at CA Technologies. And I would like to give a reminder to all of our listeners today about CA World. And there is an early bird discount that's available through the end of this week at ca.com/CA World. It's a half-price registration fee, which is supposed to expire this week. At the end of this week, there's a chance that they'll have another discounted version through September, but I don't think it'll be as attractive as this half-price registration offer now. So I encourage you to have a look at ca.com/CA World. We are going to have a large pre-conference education presence at CA World, as well as many other demos and technical talks during the week of November 13th. So we look forward to seeing you there. And with that advertisement, I'll turn it over to John Rooney.
Oh, thank you, Jean, and thank you all for spending some time here on Thursday to listen to this talk about Unwrap Your Applications. The idea behind this little talk today is about wrapper scripts, and that's why we're talking about Unwrap Your Applications, and it's meant to give you some ideas on how to develop more efficient and effective applications. So essentially taking some things out of wrapper scripts and maybe even JCL on the mainframe that you might have been doing for a long time. This is all part of our broader messaging that you might have heard us talk about, the modern software factory, and this is the heart of this one that we're talking about with workload automation is the automation part, which is build better apps faster. So we'll talk about a couple things here. The agenda. I'm going to give an idea of what's called a micro workflow, and we'll talk a little bit about a new approach to scheduling from a DevOps perspective, and then how to use CA Workload Automation for better application monitoring. This presentation really is kind of engine agnostic because a lot of what we'll be talking about is the value of the agent, the CA Workload Automation agents, and the job types that we've developed for those agents, so that using the job types out of the box for specific things instead of writing them in your wrapper script. So the idea of a micro workflow, and just to kind of give some kudos here, a lot of this presentation was built by Tom Possible from Nationwide. And what he was doing, he's part of a group at Nationwide that's looking at how to leverage the workload automation, the enterprise workload automation engine better in their environment. So part of what he looked at, and his background is more from the development side than, say, the operation side. So he was able to give a lot of perspective to me about, from his side, what he thinks were some of the problems with kind of the adoption of the out-of-the-box job types that we've been providing for many years and the agents that we have. So just a shout out and kudos to Tom, and thank you very much for your contributions here. So in his words, a micro workflow is kind of a set of scripts or JCL that performs scheduling tasks. In a lot of cases, you would, just from a legacy standpoint, you had things that were handed down because people had always done it that way. So in your JCL or your scripts, you might have your scheduling tasks, your control flow, and your dependencies. Your condition code checking, you always want to have some condition code checking, but maybe not as extensive when you're doing more of your own scheduling within this large wrapper script, say. A lot of times you may include some resource checking, activity logging, and in many cases we also see notifications, paging going out, and emails built into wrapper scripts. So as I mentioned, the micro workflows, why do they exist? Well, legacy. It's always been done that way, so we're going to continue doing it that way. And in some cases, they were based upon the scheduling tools and what was available 20, 30 years ago, and not what's available now. And you do find these types of micro workflows on mainframe as well as on open systems platforms. So what are the problems with kind of these micro workflows that we've seen in a lot of cases and you may experience at your site? Well, there's low visibility to the control paths because everything's buried within your script, say, as to what's going on and what path is going to happen based upon the return codes. So there's really no visibility as to the flow of the business process internally. A low level of transparency. In a lot of cases, if you have, say, FTPs built into your scripts, or if you're doing a check to see if some service is available or if a database is available, there's no transparency outside of that job as to what's going on within that wrapper script or that JCL. And it's tightly coupled, control flows and business logic, so it's harder to extract out what's going on because everything is all tightly coupled within that wrapper script. And to change things, you then have to change the wrapper script. In a lot of cases, in what we're talking about here with the micro workflow, is the developer is in charge of more things, like the log activity needed for recovery. They have to make sure that whatever checks that they're doing, that they're getting the output from those things that are going on and putting them out, so that way if you're taking a look, so in our case with CA Workload Automation tools and you're running them with our agents, they'll be in the spool file. So you're only going to be able to do whatever is available in that spool file, so that if they're calling outside services, they have to grab that information, that log information, and make sure that it's echoed out or stored in the standard error, standard out of the spool file. Otherwise, it's going to make troubleshooting very hard to do there. And in some cases, based upon how the flow works, you may not have the ability to restart parts of that process that you're building within that wrapper script. So as an example, let's just say that you're executing within your favorite CA Workload Automation engine, you're executing some shell script. So from the standpoint of what you're executing, all that you see when you're monitoring is just that shell script. And you may or may not decide that job is a critical job, so it needs to be on the critical path, and you want to monitor what's all the predecessor conditions going into that one shell script. And, oh, and by the way, you're only getting one return code back from that one shell script. So from an alerting standpoint, you're limited to what is being returned. Well, if you look under the covers, it's very possible, if you look at some of the shell scripts, the wrapper scripts that you're running right now, that one script may actually execute other shell scripts. So it may have child processes that are spawned off. It could do Perl scripts that may be doing backups before you do a database update or so for recoverability purposes. You could be doing some FTPs in there. So buried in this complex wrapper shell script could be that one business process that is the critical point that you need to do from an alerting standpoint. That's the one part that if that one script there doesn't run, that one business process doesn't run or runs incorrectly or gets some bad return code, that's the one that you really care about more than anything else. The trouble is, all you've seen from a monitoring standpoint is just kind of that parent wrapper script, so you don't know what all the critical processes are, or you're doing it, the critical process up to the beginning of the wrapper script, but in reality, that one shell script, which is that critical business process, may not run until 10, 15 minutes or a half hour after that wrapper script has been launched. And in reality, you really want to know when that one business process starts and when it ends. So the idea here is to change the approach to developing your workflows. And the approach here is to isolate the business logic from the environment management, alerting, notification, process control, and process dependencies that you've been building into your wrapper scripts. So with this, does come some education to the application owners and development teams as to on the why and how of the new approach. And also, you need to ensure that you have some maturity in the creation and the management of the return codes, so that way you're returning something back meaningful when it comes to a troubleshooting standpoint. Many cases, it may be creating a new role, and for instance, a workload optimization specialist to focus on the run capability for development, test, and production workloads. And I'll just kind of expand a little bit more on this here. I'll expand a little bit more later, but the idea there is if you're going into a DevOps methodology in the pre-production environment, you want to be handing over the tools to the developers more to be testing out at that point in time. So in a lot of ways, what you need is a subject matter expert on the workload tool to assist people earlier on in the process, just as they're building their business applications and they're taking a new approach to taking out the environment management and notification out of their wrapper scripts. They need to be educated on these new job types. So in a lot of cases we're taking, say, a scheduler, instead of doing an everyday scheduler, a scheduling activity is now moving to a specialist, a subject matter expert, to educate the developers in their pre-production environment. you also want to look at and leverage the use of the application agents. In many cases, the agents are going to have in the spool file output a lot of the logging information from, say, your MS SQL type flows that you're running, or Informatica. So that way, when a job fails, you can pull up the spool file and look directly in there. So it actually assists operations as well as your batch support people to help out from a troubleshooting standpoint. So you're going to use the plugins to replace the scripts and the JCL functions in this new approach, and let the scheduler control the workflow and the dependencies and the checking of the condition codes. That way you're leveraging what the workload tools are very good at doing, instead of doing all that process control flow within your wrapper script. So just a little bit more on kind of that DevOps approach to it. So as I said, this is also goes kind of hand in hand with our modern software factory approach to things, where you're trying to get into the continuous delivery of your applications into your business processes, into production, so that you can release it to your customers. So as part of the continuous delivery, you want automation through the whole process, and that means checking out your schedules and developing your schedules and running them in a pre-production environment and validating that they're going to run. So you're checking them out in your development environment. That way you know, or you're pretty well assured as much as possible, that it's going to run when you're in production. I'm not going to go through each of the individual types of personas here, but in the upper right-hand side, the workload optimization specialist, a lot of what that person's job is to be the evangelist on the new capabilities and the strategies that other people have already agreed upon that you're going to do in your environment. So if it's Informatica, if it's a database, if you're now going Hadoop, that workload optimization specialist is the person who's going to be the subject matter expert on the tool and how to implement it with your workload automation engine, and can then assist and push down and teach the development staff and the application support and the architects what's the value of using this, because in a lot of cases it's going to be because of the visibility. It's going to assist operations to make sure that should something go, there be exception in the processing, that remediation happens a lot quicker following these principles. So from a component model, what you have in blue is the idea of that kind of wrapper script that I showed earlier. So what your CA Workload Automation engine is seeing is he's kicking off the shell script, and the shell script is everything that's now in those green component boxes. And you may recognize this when you look through some of your wrapper scripts, that there's a lot of things that are duplicated or done in the wrapper script that really the workload automation engine can do. So from a component model, if you're doing, say, some alerting or notifications within the wrapper script, if we kind of move on to the new model, the modernized way of doing things, what you've done is you've taken out all of that overhead, the environment management, the process controls, the utilities and the commands out of your wrapper scripts, or your shell scripts, and you're using it just for the business logic execution. So essentially you're making your wrapper scripts smaller because you're letting the workload automation engine do what it's very good at doing. So a little bit more on that. When we talk about some of these things, what we have from an existing integration standpoint, we do have specific agents for all the different Unix, Linux, Windows varieties, HP nonstop, ZOS, and the i5s. But we've also gone a lot into the application integrations. So Oracle e-Business Suite, PeopleSoft, SAP, some of the newer ones like SAP Solution Manager, Business Warehouse, and Hadoop. And where that helps out, and just kind of from an architectural standpoint, is you're managing from an enterprise standpoint, you're managing your jobs across your shell scripts, your enterprise jobs that you used to do, say, in cron or Windows Task Scheduler. You're managing them like from an enterprise standpoint, but now you're reaching into those other islands of computing that you have a lot in your environment. So the MS SQL Server is one idea that a lot of people are doing flows, and we've talked to many customers recently where with MS SQL, they're writing their tasks and their packages within SQL Server, but there's no visibility to what's going on within SQL Server to what's going on outside of SQL Server. So the coordinating of all the activities that need to be done across the board is done in the enterprise. The engine itself, whether it's Autosys, D-Series, CA7, or ESP, and he can coordinate all of the activities. And if now there is awareness as to what's going on, so let me go to the next slide of these out-of-the-box job types. So with these out-of-the-box job types, what you can do is start to take things out of your applications so that if you need to test to see if a service is available, if you want to do a database backup, instead of putting it in your wrapper script, if you have a database object type that does, say, a SQL to do a database backup, or maybe a stored procedure to do a backup, it's very obvious to someone monitoring your application, well, you're using this backup, and you can look in there and you can see what database it is. So if that database goes offline, then it's very easy to be able to tell what services, what application problems there are going to be if those things go offline. So these out-of-the-box job types are to assist your developers without having to be, say, experts on the individual applications, the workload applications, I mean here, which would be like Autosys. So you don't have to be, say, a Jill expert on coding up a job definition if it's a fill in the blank that you have from the WCC, where it's going to ask you for specific information, and then you just kind of cut in or copy and paste into that definition. So it makes life a lot easier for creating. So you're more efficient for creating these jobs. If things need to be changed, it's very easy to find all the places where I'm doing an SFTP, or if I'm checking to see if some service is available or web service is available, or some other type of web server. I can now interrogate my database for all that information. So the idea here is, before the new pattern, you had one single job is monitored and really no visibility into what the application is actually executing. So if you now look at a greater view of this, and this is probably not the best resolution for this, so I have another slide after this, which is a smaller one, which will show it. But the idea here is that before I had only one shell script, but if I went under the covers, what was actually being done under the covers is a lot of other things that there were out-of-the-box job types that could be used instead. So another just quick, simple customer example, there was a single Unix script was used to SFTP the file, check the date on the first record to make sure that it was today's date, that it was fresh information that I'm getting from the state. This customer just happened to be getting information from state agencies. Then they would process the file and check to see if the processing was successful, and then notify support personnel if it was not successful. So it was just really one Unix shell script that was doing all that, but once they took things out and really took out the components that were out-of-the-box job types with, in this case, this was D-Series, when they just did it from a component standpoint, they actually gave better transparency as to what the process was doing. They also helped out from a troubleshooting standpoint because they are checking, is my FTP server up or down? If I'm checking that before I start my FTP, then I know that I don't have to wait for the FTP to fail and look for the underlining messages that I couldn't connect up. I've already done a check to see whether my FTP server is available that I'm going to be hooking up to, as well as do I have enough storage to get that file and put it on my file system, because I may have had something that just sucked up a lot of extra storage in that directory on that landing server that I'm using for these FTPs. So if that's the case, I want to know about it ahead of time and try and cut down my troubleshooting and pinpoint exactly what the problem could be. The text file monitor can be either a continuous that's monitoring a daemon's log file looking for things, or in this case, it's more of a one-and-done type of deal where I'm going to check the first record to see if from that state agency it has today's date on it, and so it matches up to what the file name is too. File name will have the date on it, and the first record in there better have that same date, and if those two don't match up, then I know I have a problem there. All the way down to doing the notification externally instead of within the wrapper script, so even the notification can be a job object that you execute for that. So the idea here that the operations people that are monitoring know what's going on, and the batch support people, should something go wrong, can hone in on the direct component, the direct service that has the problem, so it gets routed to the right support people quicker than having to look through a long log file, standard error and standard out, to find out exactly which part had the problem in it. So just sort of a summary here. The idea of what we wanted to just get across here, and this is just a very short type of talk here, is ways that you can simplify your script writing, and along with providing transparency on the resources needed used within that business process. If there's a out-of-the-box job type that has that feature or function that you're checking with, why not do it there? Because it's easier to then change things. It's easier to find where some service is being used, as well as change it should you be using a different server, different database vendor. if I have it all in that one, it's easier to interrogate my workload engine for those different job types being used than it is trying to look through wrapper scripts to see where those services might need to be changed. So, questions or comments, if anyone wants to put, say, in the chat or a Q&A. We'll give you some time if you want to prepare something here.
Thanks, John. That was a great presentation. Yeah, so as John just said, if you have any questions, please use either the chat box or the Q&A box right in the WebEx. We'll give you a few minutes to type. And while you're typing, I'll also remind everybody that a replay of this session will be available out in the community either later today or first thing tomorrow morning.
And if you want to just send me a private email instead of putting a question out here now, my email address is john.rooney@ca.com, so please feel free to send me an email or so on things. If you wanted to discuss these things further, you can get in touch with me or someone on my team, and we'd be very happy with doing an individual presentation on this for your organization. Maybe as an awareness, you'd want to give this to your application developers or your enterprise architects to help out. So any other questions or comments? I haven't really seen anything so far yet.
Yeah, I don't see any questions coming in, so that being the case, I guess maybe we can wrap up. As John just offered, you can reach out to him. Oh, hold on. Looks like we might have a question coming in now.
So the agent plugins, you can find documentation on those. Anyone that has already signed up for support, a CA support ID, we do have a site, DocOps, which is docops.ca.com. And in there, if you type in kind of the search product, if you type in agents, you'll see that the workload agents show up there, and you can select them that way, or you could type in workload or workload agents. And in there, there'll be a link to all the individual plugins. So that's one way that you can get information on individual plugins. If you still have some questions on the capabilities of it and examples, please feel free to contact your account rep or any of the pre-sales people that you've been working with, and I'm sure everyone knows somebody here in pre-sales that can help out with these things. Fully aware of that one. Okay, Jody, I'll send you out some specific marketing material on that. So if anyone's interested in particular marketing material on the plugins or the advanced integrations themselves, then you can contact us. And Jean, I think you're still on, right?
Yeah, still here.
What is the website? I know we have the website to download some material as well, right?
Yeah, just ca.com/WLA for workload automation.
Okay, thank you. So there is some marketing material out there as well, so you can go to our website for that.
Okay, if there are no other questions, sorry, John.
No problem.
If there are no other questions, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Like I said, the replay of this will be available in the community by tomorrow at the latest. If you have any questions that you think of after the fact, please feel free to ask them in the community or to contact John directly. So have a great day, everybody. Thanks very much, John. Thank you, Jean. And we'll see you next time.